Hi, and thanks again for joining us as we continue our conversation about cutover planning. I'm Lindsay Hudson, the Director of Operations Projects here at Nordic, and I'm joined by Jes Norman, one of our fantastic Willow pharmacy consultants. With my background at Epic, I worked primarily on the inpatient application, but I also worked with project directors to do go-live and cutover planning. Jes, can you tell us a little bit about your background as well?
Yeah, thanks again for having me. I also worked at Epic. I was primarily on the Willow inpatient app, but I also was a project director as well. So I kind of have best of both world experience when it comes to cutover.
You can share a little bit of that big picture strategy and the nitty-gritty details of pharmacy
I'm hoping
planning.
that it helps to bring in a little bit of both.
Great. We're glad to have you here today. Can you share with us some of the major themes we're going to be covering?
Yeah, I think the big things that we've struggled with from a pharmacy standpoint is really how to figure out how many people you need. What are the resources that it's really going to take to get that cutover to be successful? And then some of the more nuances when it comes down to pharmacy. So we all have those wonderful ADS machines, so the automatic dispensing systems, and they're great, but man, can they be a hassle when it comes to cutover. And then, maybe I can give you some fun stories along the way of things to look out for.
Sounds good. So let's start with that cutover planning specifically for how many people we actually need to get this done. I know when I've worked with hospital systems in the past, it's an area that is often underestimated. So tell us a little bit about what we should be looking for.
Yeah, the bad thing about pharmacy and the good thing about pharmacy is that it's really the heart of the hospital. Everything revolves around medications, and because of that, I think it's hard to realize how many pharmacists you're going to need for something like this, especially if you're in a smaller organization. It may be hard to realize that if you have a 300-bed hospital, you could be talking about thousands of orders that need to be entered in a relatively short amount of time. So there's a couple ways to come about how we're going to figure out who we all need and the best way to plan that. The biggest thing is to figure out what your census is going to be that day. So look back at your past histories, look at the previous year, look at the previous month, and see about the time that you're going live, how many people you think are going to be in the hospital. You can average out the number of orders that a patient's going to have. You could figure out the actual orders that people have. But it's a safe bet to think that the average patient is going to come into the facility with at least 20 orders. That may seem really high, but when you start talking about standing orders and fluids and things like that, you end up realizing that it's a lot of orders that patients may have. So once you figure out all of that, then we can start doing actually my other love, which is math, which nobody's going to believe that, but as a math major, I have to shout out to being able to do some simple addition and algebra here. So we can take how many orders we're going to have, and it's on average a pharmacist can put in 20 to 40 orders an hour. It's a little unreasonable to think that first-time pharmacists in Epic are going to be able to enter 40 orders an hour. That's a lot of orders. As someone who's worked with the system, I don't think I could enter 40 orders in an hour very easily. So I like to stay with the safety of 30. I think 30 is a good round number that we can use, and you can figure out from there then how far you need to back it up and how many pharmacists you're going to need. So if your ADT system is going to start doing patient conversion 24 hours before you go live, then you can guess that you can probably start putting in some orders on those patients, not at 24 hours back, but maybe at 20, because you also need to remember that nursing generally needs to put in the height, weight, and allergies before you want to enter those meds. So it's a lot of coordination between all the clinical teams on how we're going to get those orders in and what's the best way to get them in, which is really why I really suggest doing a couple of dry runs with pharmacists to see how they're going to do this and get them used to entering those orders in the system. It's a great thing to have a playground environment and have them get used to it.
When you talk about those dry runs, is that something you recommend just for the folks that are going to be involved in the pharmacy cutover specifically, or are there other dependent teams that need to be involved in that?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of doing at least a full drive one with the whole team. So with all of your clinical apps, with your interface people, with everybody that's going to be involved the night of cutover, I think it's great to go through your plan and step by step, make sure not only for your own sake that you know what's going on that day, but that you also make sure that everybody understands who's responsible for what. You know, we touched briefly, but before a pharmacist can even touch a patient and start entering orders, that patient needs to be admitted, which of course brings in your ADT team. That patient needs height, weights, and allergies, which pull in your ClinDoc and orders team potentially. Then you can bring it down to pharmacy, and pharmacy is going to enter those orders. But there's a lot of moving parts before pharmacy ever even sees that patient.
So I know one of the things that can often be challenging when you're talking about resourcing a cutover for pharmacy is getting the actual pharmacist to be able to commit the time and getting the organization to allow the pharmacist to commit that much time, because it's a lot of work, as you say, with only being able to enter 30 orders an hour. So how early in the planning should you start talking about who needs to be involved? And if you can't get as many pharmacists as you'd like involved, what other alternatives does an organization have?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm one for talking early is always better. So definitely in the beginning points of cutover, when you're starting to plan and you're starting to figure out when you're going to go live, when that go live instant is going to be, when you think you're going to start pulling in people to do the orders conversion and everything, that's when I think we should bring up pharmacy and how we're going to get the pharmacists. You know, the tricky thing with pharmacists is that there's a finite number of them. Mm-hmm. And not only is there a finite number of them, but if you have all of your pharmacists working cutover, who's working the next day? Nobody's going to want to pull a 24-hour shift. And I don't think anybody would want to do that.
How much coffee you provide.
I don't think anyone would enjoy that. So it's a good point. And you know, we've run into this issue, especially in smaller organizations where there's only a couple pharmacists that are working. And what do you do at that point? So there's a couple options. I think the most common thing that I've seen is, especially if you're going live with CPOE, what other users can you pull in to enter those orders and have them transcribed from the previous orders in your current, legacy system and put them into Epic. And I've seen anywhere from nurses doing that. In some states, it's allowable for pharmacy technicians to enter orders. I've actually had a couple places where the physicians were really involved and the physicians wanted to enter their own orders. I can't say that that's the norm, but it's happened a few times.
Certainly makes them for better prepared users once the system is truly live across the house.
It does. Even when you do this, though, you still have to have that pharmacy present. So the pharmacists still need to verify the orders. We still need to make sure that they're going to the correct locations and that labels are coming when they should, that they're making their way through the interface to those automatic dispensing systems and really being available for those nurses and the patient care providers and the patients then to have them. So a couple other options, but long story short, you have to have that pharmacist presence, and it's important to have them there.
All right, thank you.